Welcome. My name is Elizabeth Langland. I'm director of the Lincoln Center for Applied Ethics, and I'm delighted to welcome you all to Tea, Tech, and Tarot, the event that we are sponsoring for this wonderful Humanities Week. And I'd like to just take a moment to thank our Dean, Jeffrey Cohen, for even conceiving of the value of having a week focused on the humanities. It was 2 years ago that my esteemed colleague, Gaiman Bennett, and I became directors of the Lincoln Center. And at the same time, the center was moved into the Division of Humanities. It's a move that we felt was entirely appropriate. We had been working together already and had a symposium in Washington, D.C. on humane technologies. And it was on ethical innovation and humane technologies that the dean was particularly interested in bringing into the Lincoln Center. And I'm pleased to say that during the 2 years we've been in the center, we have really taken that mandate and gone forward thinking about questions that really 5 years ago when we started weren't that urgent, questions about the impact of technology in our lives, and taken them to really begin to investigate how and why technologies impact our lives and what we can do about it. You can think of things now, everyone's really quite familiar with some of those impacts, whether it's screen addiction, loss of privacy, damage to democracy, or just the constant time-wasting distractions of digital technologies. So we took this mandate and we wanted to move away from where the center had been on technology to decenter technology and put humans at the center. To ask the questions not about what technology can do, but what do we as human beings want and need technology to do. The questions putting the human at the center, of course, is at the heart of the humanities. Who are we? Where do we come from? What do we want to be? And that is what we have developed this project to begin to explore. Using tarot to think about past, where we've been, where we are, where we want to go, the future, to begin to ask those very important questions about who and what we are as humans and how technology can best fit into those lives. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce my wonderful, innovative, creative colleagues, Liz Grumbach and Erica O'Neill, who will take you into this exercise.
Way too many things in my hand and on my face. Hi, I'm Liz Grumbach. I'm the manager of Digital Humanities and Research at the Lincoln Center for Applied Ethics.
And I'm Erica O'Neill. I am the research manager in the Lincoln Center for Applied Ethics. I deal with all of our research initiatives.
I'm so excited. We're here today to move forward with y'all in an exploratory moment. We're going to experience these cards together, and then we're going to have a moderated Q&A with our artist and some of our amazing leadership in the Lincoln Center. If you're in person today, you have cards sitting in front of you. I see some of y'all are already handling them. Those cards are yours. If you do not have a deck of cards in your hand, make sure that you reach out to Erica and I before you leave so that you will have it.
Everybody gets a deck.
Everybody gets a deck. Everyone gets a deck. Everyone gets a deck. Amazing. Play around with them. Start playing around with them. So if you're joining virtually, there is a link in the chat to a web page with digital versions of the cards, and we strongly recommend having that open on your computer so that you can explore with us today. I'm going to talk just a little bit about tarot. So tarot, oracle cards, narrative storytelling decks are not necessarily always about telling the future, but seeing ourselves and our society more clearly so that we can imagine futures. So our deck is very closely based on the major arcana or arcana, which represents the fool's journey. In our deck, it's the seed's journey or the seedling's journey through life, through troubles, through triumphs. So think about those things as you play around in your hands, tangibly connect with the decks, or online connect with the decks. We're going to ask you today to explore this deck and open yourself up to perspectives and realizations that you might have previously been blocked from. So these perspectives and realizations might be related to technology, or they might, as our director, Elizabeth Langland, said, center the humanities and the human. All decks are deeply, deeply symbolic, just like our deck. So if I were to, and I'm going to maybe not be able to handle a PC anymore. Okay, there we go. So if I were to draw, I know, right?
So I'm just going to rotate around, and as you guys are trying to do this after the quick intro, I'm here to help, just real quietly on the side, while Liz introduces the activity.
Thank you, Erica. I made her stand up here for way too long. Thank you. So if I were to draw these cards from the deck, I would start to look at the imagery. So imagery is really, really important in decks like these. So if I were to draw the seed first, I would immediately realize certain things about it. So I could see like the seed is actually growing up from this crack in the ground, which is a road. In the background, there are these kind of destroyed buildings. There's some rubble happening here. So what does that mean to me? What is that card telling me something about myself, our society, the future? That's kind of what we're going to explore together today. I could talk about the Valkyrie, which is one of my favorite cards. They are riding towards us. They are in motion. They are moving forward. They're holding things in their hands. What else? What were you connecting to? What things in their hands are you connecting to? And I should say that we are going to hear from the artist that amazingly brought these cards to life in the Q&A portion of today. That artist is Neil Smith, and I would actually love to clap for Neil right now. He is sitting over here. All the way from the UK, so that's really exciting. So what we're going to ask you to do is we're going to ask people in the room to turn to a partner at the table. Ideally one other person at your table. We're going to ask you to draw 3 cards, just like on this slide. Perhaps that would be a past, present, and future for yourself. And then just experience, like talk to y'all. So we want to make sure that as you're looking through the cards, you're shuffling them first. So connect tangibly to these cards in your hand, shuffle them so that you're experiencing the Fool's Journey at random. And then I will say, if you are joining us on the live stream, as you are experiencing those cards on the web pages, pick 1 to 3 cards that resonate with you. We have our amazing project coordinator, Karina Fitzgerald, in chat, and she will be there for any explorations or anything you want to report. So talk to each other in chat, and we're so excited that you joined us today. Thank you. Our in-person exercises. If your partner does not share their spread yet, make sure that that happens. We'll be back with you for Q&A in just about 5 to 8 minutes, but make sure that your partner shares their spread with you as well.
Hello. We love all the conversation that is being generated. If you guys can wrap up your current thought or your current spread or your current discussion with the human that you're with, we're going to transition into a question and answer session with some of the folks that we have in the room who are experts in the subject matter, and then our illustrator as well. So I'd like to welcome first Elizabeth Langland again, the director of the Lincoln Center, to the stage. So she's going to be here for our Q&A. And then we also have Gaiman Bennett, who you have not yet met. He is the associate director and associate professor of science, religion, and technology in the School for Historical, Philosophic, and Religious Studies. And we have our guest of honor here, all the way from England, the illustrator Neil Smith. So Neil, woo! Neil has worked with us on this project. He's done a wonderful job interpreting some of the visual symbols and symbology that we're trying to get across with the deck. So we encourage any sort of questions that you have about the way that you are interacting with it. He's worked for some really high-profile publications, and then also works for Zombified Media as our illustrator as well, which is funded by the Lincoln Center. And we have Athena Actipis here, who is hosting a conference on that. We will also be at this weekend if you're interested in hanging out with Neil more after this. But I will transition to the first question that we have and hand it off to Liz.
Hi, y'all. So actually, I have a question, mostly for Elizabeth. So I'll start with that, if that's all right, Director Langland. How does this project exemplify the mission of the Lincoln Center or the Division of Humanities? You talked quite a bit in that introduction about those things, and it would be awesome to hear more. And I will pass this down.
From my point of view, the humanities are uniquely poised to think about, as I said, our past, our present, and our future. And we do that through our various disciplines, whether it's history, whether it's the study of culture, through languages and literatures, whether it's through philosophy or religion. And one of the things we've been asking you to do with these tarot cards is do that same kind of critical thinking about the past, present, and a potential future. And one of the ways I've been thinking about it myself, of course, given our focus in the Lincoln Center on technology, and particularly humane technologies, is what is our relationship to technology in the past? What is it now? And how do we, in the future, protect ourselves from the dangers and predations of emerging technologies? So one of the things I love about these cards is the way they juxtapose the built environment and the natural environment. And humans from our earliest inception, of course, have always been dealing with technologies, a built environment, whether the wheel or the pencil. We've always adapted and adjusted. In the 19th century, of course, with the Industrial Revolution, the pace of change intensified. It is intensified in the 20th century and now going on where we are. And it's not clear that anymore we can adapt and respond sufficiently to the change to alter it in ways that are truly going to be beneficial for us. The change is happening so fast that sometimes I feel the technological change is overwhelming our human potential to keep up with it and transform it and interact with it in the way we need to. And again, the same questions we're asking are questions that the humanities is deeply preoccupied with.
Thank you. So I'll pause. I have other questions for our awesome panel, but does anybody in the room have a question that they would like to pose? Okay, so we have a question in the back, and I'm actually going to walk the mic over to you so that we can hear you.
It's pretty loud.
Oh, you are. But we're going to hand you the mic.
Okay. Sounds good. In this modern stage where it seems like technology is progressing faster, almost faster than we can understand it and quantify it and categorize it and break it down to parts that we can fully comprehend. how do you keep up with the challenge of facing so many of these new technologies that are coming out all at once?
What an amazing question.
I'm happy to respond to it. I mean, on one level, of course, how can you respond to it? I mean, the question is in the question. But there are a number of things I think are significant. One is 5 years ago, 10 years ago, at least in the United States, it was pretty hard to have a conversation about the kind of shadow side of new technology. It's not hard to have those conversations now. I do my research, I'm an anthropologist, I do my research among people in Silicon Valley, and there's almost no one you can talk to, at least over for, who's been there for a certain amount of time, who isn't sort of standing back and saying like, well, what did I just help create? Now that's in part because it's connected to big companies who complicate this question because the size and the power of the companies is just as much an issue as the technologies themselves. And so those two things are sort of hard to pull apart. So that's one thing. The second is because of our attention to the shadow side, I think there is a kind of collective willingness to ask questions about whether or not we want certain things. That's pretty new, actually. I mean, it doesn't sound radical when you stop to think about it, except that the way in which we've treated innovation in this country is that if you get in the way at all, like you're doing more harm than good because you don't know what benefits are going to come out of it. And so as a result, there's been a kind of cult of innovation that's grown up. And I think that even in a place like ASU, which is entirely more thoughtful than a lot of other places, there's still a kind of sense in which like, if you say the word innovation, you really mean making things better. But in practice, it really just means like changing things. And so I think there's a question of like, what change is good change? And at the risk of sounding fuddy-duddy or something, like also to ask the question, like, what is it that people have gotten right? I mean, a lot of cultures and cultural traditions, time out of mind, not least that remain largely marginalized today, have gotten a lot right. And so to ask the question, what's in there that is the value that we seek? And how do we build technology in relationship to those aspirations rather than, the inexorable demands of the market or what have you? I know that was a kind of non-answer, but I said a lot of words.
All right, I believe we have an audience question.
Thank you. This is amazing and so fun and cool and interactive. And I feel like it really invites us to bring our entire humanity to the table, literally, our humanity to the table, to, engage about what the content is of these cards. And so I kind of wanted to ask a question about for all three of you, maybe what was the idea with the process, what it's like for someone to interact with this deck. I noticed that there's not a little booklet that says how you should interpret each card. You've really left that open to each, person or pair to kind of talk through that and have a conversation about what that means. And so how do you see the process of tarot and this with this deck in particular and the decisions, the design decisions, the process decisions with that playing a role or reflecting the processes maybe that you want people to be going through as they're thinking about the relationship between past, present, and future technology?
Would anyone on our panel like to start? We would love to hear.
Hello. Well, I can talk a bit about process. I think so. Tarot for me is that is not. It's never been a part of my sort of cultural life. So so this project was kind of exciting for that, really. But I think the whole idea of it is that we talked pretty early about themes and the mood of it, and we talked about it being a bit dreamy and a bit abstract, slightly strange, and I think a lot of that came from really brilliant briefs. So obviously Erica and Liz were sort of spokespeople for your group, but there was a really brilliant briefs that had maybe 4 bullet points. So these are the marks to hit, but at the same time terrifically open-ended, with room for me to kind of slightly make it up as I go along, or create a little world based on the mood board that we put together initially. But the whole idea of them really is that they're strange enough, abstract enough, dreamy enough to be able to project onto them, to bring something of yourself to them. But I think the mood board is always an important part of my process. Athena and I have worked together for a little while, putting together mood boards to give a sense of atmosphere, and so that that we can talk about something visual before it exists, almost. Talking about colour we like, talking about mood and atmosphere, and our conversations initially involved a lot of talking about, a bit like this or a bit like that, and it was great because it was a whole bundle of cultural references that I didn't know, that I'd go down little rabbit holes with, and cultural references that maybe you guys didn't know that you could explore. Like, this whole process for me made me think a lot of Simon Stellenhag's work that I really like, and that's airy and atmospheric and strange, I'm pretty happy to go down that kind of road. It doesn't take too much encouragement. What was your question? Okay.
Airy and strange. Yeah. Want to say a bit about the project and where it came from?
Well, why don't you start and I'll chime in.
Okay, so we've been doing, one step to the side. The Lincoln Center is very much committed to the idea that the knowledge and outputs that we bring into the world are co-designed. That can become jargon very quickly, but what it means in practice is making sure you think a lot about whose voices are in the room and how are those voices being heard. And at the same time, allowing people who might otherwise be quite remarkable people in their little corner of the world to get together in the room. In our case, it turned out to mostly be Zoom room, but as just humans together. And so our sense that we needed to talk about how technology is changing our lives, but we wanted to talk really about how our lives were changing in the presence of technology, led us to a series of what we called design studios, in which we brought together a kind of unexpected cohort of people from industry, particularly designers from industry, some of our scholarly academic friends, some people who were more specialized in kind of participatory style research, and some folks who have experience with a kind of more activist orientation to some of the same kinds of questions. So there's people who knew a lot about technology, but once they were in the room together, weren't really invited to talk about technology. They were invited to talk about how, like, your relationship to work has changed, or how does your body feel misfit in an environment that's industrial and largely digitized, and these kinds of questions. Along the way, so that was a long setup for a short punchline, which was, along the way, one of our participants is really remarkable, who runs an ethics consultancy in the Bay Area and has done a lot of work for companies that she's eventually had to walk away from because she's hit her head on the wall, but nonetheless leaves traces, I'm sure, because of her work. She said at the end of one of our meetings, like, the thing that I love about these conversations is they're so rich, so you feel like you're really talking about something, but they're open-ended and you don't know where they're going to go. And I wish that our outputs could be something that had that kind of richness to it, but were open-ended and we didn't know where it would go. And as a staff, we began to talk about what are the things in our lives that give us both this sense of meaning, but a kind of unexpected open-endedness, whereby we can think about who we are today in view of possible ways in which we might be someone else tomorrow. And but that's what sparked the idea of Tarot, and then Tarot and technology. Liz and Erica and others knew Neil, so that was a very natural place for us to go. Last point on this, I'm talking way too much, I apologize. But last point that was also part of the excitement for us about this is Tarot's a kind of strange animal in the world today. I talked a little bit about it in my religious studies class this morning. You say Tarot, and 2/3 of the room, or a third of the room, say, is like really excited. Because like Tarot's resurgent. Like there are a lot of artists and thinkers and spiritual leaders and others who are thinking again about Tarot, whatever Tarot might be. And then there was another part of the folks in the room who were like kind of lean back like, oh, is tarot something we're supposed to play with? Both the hesitation, the discomfort, and the excitement are why we're interested in tarot. You know, I'm a religious studies professor, so I can't resist. The resistance to tarot, as far as it showed up over the last 1,500 years or so, really came from the idea that only the gods know the future. And if you start trying to divine the future, you're playing with the realm of the gods. And then after about like the 17th century or so, it shifted a little bit. And what the shift was, magic's not real. If you do things that look like magic, you're doing something illicit, and that's dangerous for other people who might get caught in your webs of lies or something. Well, like, neither of those things really hold anymore. First of all, we live in a world today in which we think a lot about the way in which futures are made and created, and obviously not only made and created by humans, and among the humans who do make and create it, like, shall we say, not enough voices are part of that process. But also, it turns out, tarot was never really about prognostication, about predicting the future. It was about thinking about the future in such a way that you could learn something about yourself and your relationship to possible futures, how you wanted to change, who you wanted to become. Well, I'm at ASU. It turns out ASU's got a number of like big initiatives, including consultancies, who do this. They do things like threat casting, or scenario planning, or foresight. Some of you are familiar with these terms. They're all around the tech industry. What are these all about? Well, if you ask somebody who does threat casting what they're about, one of the first things they tell you is it's not prognostication. It's not about prediction. It's about thinking about imagined possible futures so that we can know whether or not the person we are today is capable of facing those futures. And so I really like the idea that these new technologies of future imagination are in fact part of a very long legacy that includes things like the practice of tarot.
I'm going to be very brief because I think that was wonderful and eloquent and you all understand it. I just want to underline what Gaiman was saying about our process. These studios, these design studios, we bring people together. We think of it first as a process of discovery for the first group. And then we want to move toward what we've been calling development. How can we, out of this process of discovery we've been engaged in, create something that we could give to others so they too can become participatory in this very important research?
What an amazing challenge for everyone that's taking home a deck. Please be part of the Lincoln Center research with us and come chat with us if you want. We have time for about one more question, if anyone has a question. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, I don't know how to maybe best phrase this, but how do you think that this type of like open-mindedness to things that were previously seen as like whether it was seen as taboo or seen as illegitimate, but essentially this ability to open up the mind to possibilities as opposed to just looking at the direction that things are going, how do you think that might change the direction, like if society does go more in that direction, how do you think it could change the direction of innovation?
Everyone's agreeing that's such a good question at the table. I think it is an amazing question too. Neil, if you would like to talk about your experience with these cards in this project, because this was something that you weren't necessarily familiar with tarot.
I think I need to understand the question a little better. Would you say it again?
I guess just the way that society's going versus how it could go. I guess maybe the best way to phrase it would be looking at stuff like venture capital and just a lot of like investment backing behind it. The more that society is open to possibilities as opposed to just like going in the direction that society's already going, how do you think that can maybe change the? I don't know. It's a complicated question.
Yeah, it feels like it's a too complicated question for me actually. Gaiman, do you want to take this one? I mean, I can talk.
Think about how innovation might things like tarot continue to come out of the shadows?
Well, I mean, it's a funny one for me because, like, I'm a digital illustrator, so I'm kind of for the vast quantities of my days, I'm a cyborg plugged into my MacBook, and I work exclusively in Adobe Illustrator. So it's a digital program. I'm subject to relentless updates from Adobe. I need technology to do my job and to express myself. I draw, but I draw sort of in a doodly, cartoony way. But in order to do this kind of work, I need Illustrator, I need the internet, I need photographs. All of these photographs are all of these illustrations are like, they're like total Frankenstein's monsters. So the charismatic leader there, I think I took Trump's mouth. I took Musk's eyes, and I took who's the dude? The Amazon dude. Bezos. Took Bezos's head, and sort of stitched them all together, and stirred the pot, and came up with this kind of mad character who's got more than a touch of Dr. Evil about him. So for me, the technology and Apple and the kind of the we were talking before about magic. For me, this kind of this world I live in, this technological age, it's indistinguishable from magic. I don't know what's going on behind my MacBook screen. I couldn't repair this thing if I needed to, and yet I'm entirely dependent on it for my living and for my creative expression. So that's kind of a funny one for me. But also, I'm not a techie guy. I know a lot of people in my line of work who are, completely into their Apple products, obsessed with the next iPhone, obsessed with the next MacBook release, and that is just not me at all. It's really functional for me, and I would be delighted to step back from my technology. I took my email off my phone. I would have a dumb phone in a heartbeat, I think, if it wasn't for the fact that I had no sense of direction. So it's kind of funny for me, and I suppose the thing I thought of all the way through this was something that came up quite early, which is this idea of retreating back into nature, but taking the really good technology with us. And that's what I just thought, that was always at the back of my mind, this kind of idea of, I think as I get older, I've got this, I've got a kind of funny hippie urge to go, to move to the countryside. But I'm such an urbanite, I'm such a, MacBook typing, avocado mashing, flat white drinking, urban twat. I think Athena's described me as an evolutionary mismatch on more than one occasion. So this idea of going back to nature would be pretty terrifying, but maybe if I could take the good technology with me, I'd stand a chance. Wouldn't be eaten by bears. But this doesn't answer your question at all, I'm afraid.
It sort of does.
So I'm going to pass over to somebody with a bigger brain.
2 minutes.
I would only add on this wonderful riff that we've just had from Neil, too wonderful, that just to respond to your question about the trouble with so much of technology, even those who start with, ethical and high ideals, by the time they get through the venture capitalists, it's all about making money. And so it's all driven that way. And so when we think about innovating in a different way, somehow we have to free it from the technology, the nexus of capital.
One short thought, which is things like tarot were driven into the shadows as much by organized religion as by science and technology and a kind of dominant view of the world that, like, magic doesn't have a place. But of course it was driven in the shadows, and everybody followed into the shadows. The most secular among us were still doing things like tarot. And so if things like tarot come out of the shadows, and if we use them in interesting and wise ways, This means more voices get to be a part of the conversation, and more technologies of imagination that tap into very different sorts of resources get to be part of our collective experiment with trying to make technology into the thing we want it to be.
So we have already clapped, but for everyone that's joining us on the live stream, for everyone that's joined us in person, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for everyone on our Q&A panel. We'll clap for them one more time, please. And if you do not have a tarot deck in your hand, please make sure that you see myself or Erica so that we can get you one before you leave. Thank you for being here.